Welcome to Metafix, critical thinking for competitive play. As we go into the next round of tournament season, this one being the WKO season, it's important to know that with new sets around the corner and the current flow of the game, we have to kind of watch design flow. And this is going to be a weird episode that encourages thinking in the long term and flexibility of strategy. And these are the two things we need to understand to make you a better long-term player. A lot of times, team players get stuck in a mode. Players more comfortable playing tent poles, big point characters, followed by a little bit of support. Sometimes a player is natural with playing a lot of figures that create characters. A lot of times a player is great with every number of resources that show up. Sometimes a player is great just using weird finessey things and tons of probability control. All of these are aspects that make players, but at the same time, what makes great players is the ability to adapt. And by that, I mean being competitive in any game, be it Heroclix, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon. You gotta understand is that the design of games changes over time. And what's important about that statement is that in any game, the competitive, what's called metagame, or what wins and what does well and what is played, changes. Of course, because of the modern age that we play in competitive play, a lot of it is a forced change. Other parts of it is changes as a result of the evolution of the game. This is all natural of collectible games in any environment, and any good player knows that eventually they're going to run into a metagame or a competitive environment that confuses them, puts them off guard, and kind of puts them in a weird place. Recently, that happened to myself in the more recent metagame of Quinjets, but then Slingshots were taking care of Quinjets, and then Quinjets came back again, and it's been a hectic time for me. It's been a great year for me as far as competitive play is concerned. I am doing better than I usually do. I'm getting my name on top 16s and top 32s here and there, and top 8s occasionally. But at the same time, sometimes I do have to kind of play copycat just to tread water for a little bit, and that's okay. Because constant adaptation can get overwhelming at times. And if you don't have a strong head for understanding an environment where you're not necessarily going to do well, you're going to get in your own head. And you got to be careful of that. So where we're going with this entire idea is that when we talk about adapting, we look forward to the Joker's Wild set, which will go into great detail once we have the set in hand and we get a good idea of a lot of what's going to be strong in that set. But if you look in the way that set's designed, there's a lot of very low point characters, and this is a trend that has started at Nick Fury and kind of continued on. Now, there are of course exceptions in each of these sets. Nick Fury had its high-end super rares and a couple 100 points figures here and there. World's Finest had its chases and a couple outliers, 100 point super rares here and there. And then we had X-Men, which had a good mixture of figures at point values. And then we had Superior Foes of Spider-Man, which also had a weird mixture of the Uncanny X-Men. Then we got to Joker's Wild and got a really low drop on that. Now, it could just be the design flow is adding to what already exists, and this could be the first time that we're actually seeing Heroclix develop outside of the bubble of an individual set, or it could just be that this set is meant to be played classically with 9 figures on the board. Who knows? What I'm getting at here is that adapting to this oftentimes is difficult, especially if it steps outside of your play style. Heroclix, since the get-go, has had the strategy of being able to play, or the option of being able to play more than half of your team in a singular figure. Unlike most tabletop strategy games, you're not limited by a specific build set in the game. Now, granted, there are limiters on things that aren't characters, but for the most part, when it comes to characters, you can spend your entire points on a single figure. You can spend half your points on a figure. You can spend a little bit of points on 100 figures. It's all a matter of a little bit more customizability in a strategy game that Heroclix offers than any other one. But at the same time, when the entirety of the environment kind of drops a certain level of that options, it gets a little daunting for players who are used to that. And if you're more familiar with playing, I got a big figure on my team, and this figure is going to be really hard to hit, and I'm going to put a bunch of things to help it. You're going to get thrown off when, there's 6, maybe 5 or 6 of those characters, and they may not be able to compete with a lot of what's on the board. So one of the first tricks to adapting is watching design flow. And by watching design flow, I mean, as I said, the sets that we've seen a steep drop in the point cost of figures. So we do understand that figures themselves are becoming a little bit more linear, and we have to watch how that point drop relates to the characters themselves. Because if you actually look at the characters that are getting their point drops and how their stats to powers kind of match up, powers are on the down, stats are on the up. So what we're seeing is in design flow, the powers are becoming more expensive, but the stats are skyrocketing on lower point figures. It's something to keep a good close eye on, because in the long term, we could actually start to see very, very low point figures with, just numbers on their dials. And, with the customizability we get out of resources, we might see some awesomeness come out of that. But at the same time, we're also going to see very linear figures, like we've seen with the Justice Society coming in Joker's Wild. There's a lot of low point, single-use figures. Being aware of this existence isn't necessarily a bad thing. This design flow isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you just have to be aware of it, one, to see how it competes with, if you're more familiar with big figures, etc., how to deal with it. Because if you actually look at the flow of big figures that are being made, there's a significant more power coming to them when they're dealing with lower point figures in a lot of cases. So awareness in the big picture goes a long way in regards to the watching how design is going in the game. As well, understand timelines of the modern age. Now, recently on Metafix, I was discussing for a long time, I said Nick Fury was the bubble set, but then I was reminded that World started in June about a year ago, which means that June actually becomes the World's month, and that also becomes your cutoff. And the standard rule is a set shows up twice at Worlds and then it's gone, which means we're looking at Age of Ultron actually being the bubble set, and probably a set that's going to survive one more year of the game, which means you have to compare what's coming out to what has come out from Age of Ultron and up. Now, if you look at Age of Ultron and up, Age of Ultron has a lot more of the bigger point figures as far as design is concerned, but then everything after that drops off in points. And as well, the quality of figure at the higher point value in Age of Ultron isn't that great. Actually, some of Age of Ultron's best stuff is in the 30-point line with 120-point output, if you catch my meaning. So watching how this all flows together can make you a more adaptable, more evolving player. If you find yourself stuck in a strategy that's been doing well for the year, but that strategy's on its way out, and you have to kind of jump in the deep end very quickly on what's coming around the corner, you might find yourself treading a little water and swallowing some water if you're not careful. At the same time, if you've been playing the same thing for a whole year, you might find yourself, underwater being tugged down by an undertow. Where I'm going is, you have to constantly tread water, be aware, be adaptable, start trying new stuff with all the new stuff all the time. Be adaptable with all the new sets, and be aware of what each figure is available and capable of, because once the old stuff is gone and some of those old hat tricks are no longer viable, you have to look to those future sets and be able to play in that environment. So design flow awareness goes a long way towards making an adaptable player and an evolving player, and it'll make you as a player, significantly better in the long term for it. With that said, thank you guys very much for watching. And as always, remember, when you're evolving with the design flow, be ready to practice with some of that stuff, because practice will make your teams better now and in the future. Have a good night, guys.
Married with Clix is brought to you in part by MajesticCCG.com. Check out the new premium site with MajesticCCG.com/Apex-Insiders. Check the link below. Trust me. Trying to remember that from me talking? Not going to help. You'll get awesome articles at $3 a month, with the first month being free, from amazing writers such as Paris Gordon, Easton Brock, Aaron Cantu, I'm even going to be contributing occasionally. And if you're familiar with the Meta Lab, check out some of Mike Payne's articles. So check it out again, majesticccg.com/apex-insiders for your look into the minds of some of the greats.